Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Gosh, I feel like FDR or something doing fireside chats, which, by the way, if you're into that type of thing, would definitely recommend listening to his fireside chats back from when I think it was the Great Depression that was happening in the 30s, right? It's actually really interesting and quite relevant to what's been going on in this past year. But, anyways, in today's video, I just wanted to kind of take a little trip down memory lane and share with you guys a little bit about my story of getting into Turo and actually the story of all the cars that I've had. And I'm going to do this kind of off the top of my head because I want to see which cars I can remember. And I'm going to give you guys just like little notes on all the different types of cars that I've had, why some did well and maybe others didn't, because I've had pretty much every type of car that you can think of over the years. So started on Turo almost 6 years ago, and back then Turo wasn't even Turo. They were called Relay Ride, so it was just completely different. There was hardly anyone on the platform at that time. It was so new, and the systems and structures that are in place today did not really exist as much back then. And how I got into it was because from my previous business that I had a virtual assistance company where I had a bunch of virtual assistants that were overseas, and they were handling all types of tasks for my clients that were also all over international. And they would do everything from, drop shipping, customer support. It was heavily involved in e-commerce. Anyway, so I had never really met any of my clients because it was all just done online. And one day I had a client who flew into town from Peru, and he was staying in LA. And he had sent me a message like, hey, we've been working together for years. Maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of just meet up and meet each other face to face. So I met up with him, and, I noticed he had a nice house and he had a nice car, but he didn't live in LA. So I was just inquiring about, how he had his setup while he was in town. And he told me that he rented the house off of Airbnb and that he got his car off of an app called Relay Rides, which I had never heard of before. I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And I remember that day on my way home, literally being on the 405 freeway, I had a smart car, which was leased at the time for like $99 a month, when smart cars were really new. And I was like, let me just check this app out. So I opened it up, and I had a couple photos of the smart car on my phone, and I was like, let me just upload it and just see what happens. I worked from home. I didn't really drive anyways. The smart car wasn't my main car. I actually had an personal car of my own at the time. And so I was like, let me just list this and see what happens. And sure enough, literally within days, I had bookings for that car, and I never saw that car again. It was always out all the time. And so at that point I was like, maybe I should get another smart car and just see how that does. So then I added another smart car, and that did really well. And then I added a Mini Cooper, a little blue convertible Mini Cooper that I got from CarMax, and that actually did really well too, because just being in Southern California, having that convertible element to it, those cars just tend to do well because it's just so synonymous with being in California, driving down PCH. I'm close to the beach cities, so it was very popular. Same thing with my smart car. My smart car was a convertible. The other one wasn't, but they did well because at that time, I'm in Orange County, so I'm much more in sort of a suburban area, far more residential. But at that time, the big Turo market was LA. There was really not a lot of business coming in from Orange County. So people that were renting, they were staying in LA, which is why the smart cars did well, because they're convenient to park, and LA has awful parking. So that was really popular as well. From there, I'm trying to think what else. I got into some like really random cars, like just not knowing the market and really knowing, or even really thinking about catering to the needs of people. I got into like a Kia Sorento. There was a Chevy Silverado truck, which did not do well at all. And I still don't think that there is really a good, strong truck market in Southern California. Maybe if you're in Texas, if you're in Utah, if you're in areas where, there's national parks and people are driving out to places like that, I think that trucks would do really well over there. But for Southern California, it just wasn't there. And even all these years later, I don't see that market really doing that well here. That car did not do well, and it was just far too much wear and tear on that car because anyone who did rent it, they wanted to rent it to move or to tow something, and that's just, you don't want your car really being utilized too much for that type of stuff. I got into a Jeep Sahara that did really well. It was white. It was really nice. Jeeps are very, very, very popular and sought after during those days. And that actually became a category or segment of Turo that became super saturated. People really caught on to Jeeps doing really well. And so many people listed them. And that was the one car where I saw huge changes in pricing because so many people moved into having Jeeps that people just had to keep dropping pricing just to get those rentals out. It became very cutthroat and very competitive. Since then, it's balanced out. I still have a Jeep. I have the new what is it, the JLs? I always get confused between the JKs and the JLs, but whatever the new one is. So I have that, which is really cool. And that one still does well. People love it. The prices have gone up, which is nice. You know, that one will go out for at least at minimum 80 per day, and it's just upwards from there. And then from there, I started getting into, or I started realizing that the area I was in was sort of a more deluxe market where people wanted nicer cars. And then even for me personally, I wanted to get into nicer cars because that's sort of what I enjoyed more than having like a Kia Sorento. I even had a Hyundai Sonata, and even the smart cars, right? There's just a different level of treatment to the lower end cars than there was to the higher end cars. And I really wanted to work with a clientele that was wanting the higher end cars. So then the first luxury car that I got into was a Corvette. It was a white soft top convertible Corvette. I remember I named that car Cece, and I couldn't believe that they even sold it to me at the time. I think I was 25, and I really had like no credit because it was just young credit, and I couldn't believe that they let me walk off the lot with that car. I remember when I bought that car, going to the dealership, before I even knew I was going to really buy it, I had listed it on the platform at $172 per day. I still remember this. And as I got to the dealership, I got a booking for that car, and I was like, oh my God, I better be able to buy this car because I just got a really good booking for it. And sure enough, I ended up walking off the lot with it. So that is kind of what led me down this domino effect of buying a bunch of C7s, because those cars, that first car, CC, just performed so well. And it was just such a nice combination. It was gorgeous. It was white, black soft top convertible that was automatic, and it was perfect for being in Southern California. People just loved that car. And everyone who rented it, it was either like couples coming into town, people traveling for business. It was a really cool clientele that sought out that car. And not only that, but I had a lot of people internationally that wanted to drive that car because it is the American sports car, right? It's what America is really known for, one of the cars that they're known for. So a lot of people really loved that car. And from there, I think I ended up buying like 6 C7s of every combination that you can think of: the 1LT, 2LT, 3LT, Z51, soft tops, hard top, the Targa tops. I mean, I did it all, and they were all awesome and just great cars. And obviously, I still love them. I still have a C7, and I just got into a C8, which is amazing. And then from there, I'm trying to think, what other types of cars did I get into? Then I started really thinking about offering cars that offered a unique experience. So I remember that I rented a white Polaris Slingshot off of Turo because I had never seen these cars and I wanted to check out what it was. So I checked one out. It was actually my neighbor. My neighbor who lived in the same complex as me had his white Polaris listed on Turo. And I was like, well, this is perfect. He's my neighbor. Let me rent it from him. Let's check this out. So I checked it out. It was awesome. It was so cool. They weren't very expensive, and it seemed to have like a high perceived value just because of the way that it looked. Just taking it out for a day and seeing all the people who had questions about it and inquired about it, I knew that that would do well. So I got my first Polaris, which was a black one, and that was like kind of the Batmobile. Unfortunately, that got totaled over the years, but it was amazing. Everybody loved it. And I actually simultaneously got a second one as well, which is the red one that I currently still have. And that car has done well. Again, some very similar factors that contributed to it doing well is, it has no top, so you kind of have that convertible type feel being in the area that I'm in. Just the way that it looks is so unique. Most people don't know what it is, so people are really attracted to just the way that the car looks. And then the interesting thing about the Polarises is that the two that I had, they were all manual transmissions. Actually, how I learned how to drive stick shift, because I didn't know how to drive stick before that, and I had to learn. And it was really easy to drive, and surprisingly, throughout the many years that I've had these Polarises, I've had no issues with the clutch. I've had no issues with people not knowing how to drive them. So the cool thing about those cars is I think because they are manual transmissions, it attracts a certain type of person to rent that car. And usually it's people who know what they're doing. And so I've had really good experiences with that. Now, I believe since the 2020 models came out, they have automatic. I think automatic is a great way to go too. Of course, you open up to more people being able to rent that car. But I never really had a lack of demand for my Polarises because they were manual transmissions. So that's good. But that probably has a lot to do with where I am also geographically. So I think that makes a difference. From there, I got into a couple of Mercedes-Benzes. I had a convertible, which did really well. I got into an E450. That one did okay. And I recently read a comment where somebody said it's like the stepchild because it's like neither here nor there. It's kind of just like a step below the S550. And it is an in-between car. It's really nice. And I think just not enough people know about that car. So it didn't do as well as I had hoped that it would have done. So I would rethink that going back into that car. And then I think I got like another basic C300, but that one had some really cool trim on it, like the AMG trim, red seats, white. So it had a good perceived value to it. It looked very sporty, had the nice AMG rims on it. And that one did pretty good too, which I still have that one. And then I got heavily into BMWs, in part because, again, where I'm located, BMWs are very popular. You see every other car is a BMW around here, so it's a car that is common. And a lot of you ask me, like, how do you decide what car is going to do well on Turo? Now, of course, you have to do your market research, and there's a lot that goes into that, and I'll get into that in another video. But also just kind of using like common sense and looking around in your area to see what type of cars people gravitate towards, right? So if you're in Southern California, of course we have majority of the year where we have great weather. Like people like convertibles, not just the locals, but also people coming into town. So you really cater to a wide audience. Same thing with my BMWs. I could just see physically that people in this area love BMWs. It's just one of those cars that is very common. Same thing like Teslas. In my area, I could almost bet that my area has the most Teslas per capita than anywhere else. Like it's crazy how many Teslas are here. Like again, like I'm saying, majority, every other car is a Tesla or it's a BMW. So you have to kind of look at where you're at and what people are into, right? A lot of tech companies in my area. So a lot of working professionals that are familiar with technology. So their curve of being comfortable driving Teslas is way different than being somewhere where that's not common, right? So around here, everyone knows what a Tesla is. Everyone knows that they require charging. Everyone knows that there's supercharging stations. So it's just that path to resistance is not really there in this area because so many people are familiar with it, which is why my Tesla Model S also performed really well. That was another car that I added. But going back to the BMWs, I added a bunch of BMWs in pretty much every series that you can think of. a 2 Series, a 4 Series, X4s, the M40i's, a 6 Series. I mean, I kind of explored them all. By far, my X4s have performed the best, and they are a little bit unique in that they are M40i's, so they're a little bit higher end. They sound really good, turbocharged, and it's really quite audible. So that has really been the fan favorite, which is interesting, right? Because that's not a convertible, but it's more in that midsize SUV range, crossover, whatever you call it. So those did really, really well. People always have a pleasant experience in that car. And then I got into a Vanderhall Venice, which has been a little bit of an uphill battle just because of the Vanderhall itself. And on that note, let me just say this. I get a lot of messages where people are like, oh, I'm going to buy a Vanderhall and list it on the platform. Last I heard, Turo is no longer taking Vanderhalls on the platform. So please just be sure any car that you are listing on the platform that you just double check that you can list that car and that it's still available as an option before you go and buy one and then you can't list it, and that would just be awful. So definitely take that into consideration. There's been so many more cars. I think I counted the other day that I had at least 35 cars. That has to be well over, $1.2 million in cars that I've had on the platform, which is really crazy to think about over the years. It's been great for my credit, for sure, just having cars that, I personally bought back then. So it's been a really interesting journey to see which cars people gravitate towards and which cars people have really great experiences in. Now moving forward, going into 2021, as you guys can see by the purchase of the C8, I really want to get into cars that are a little bit more on the deluxe end of things, that can get higher day rates, that have a lot of perceived value built into them. And that's why I love these Corvettes. I love Polarises. I love Vanderhalls because they're not that expensive, but you can get a high day rate on them because they provide just such a unique experience. And they're just so different from everything else. They stand out and people are always willing to pay for experience. I think most people like that attention when they're in something that is different than everyone else, when they can drive down PCH in Laguna Beach, or they can take a trip out to Palm Springs or Santa Barbara, and you are in this gorgeous red C8 that's a convertible, and just really living out that sort of California dream, right? So people want that. So really take into consideration where you're at and what caters to your local market and people traveling in. What are people looking for in your geographical region? And then use that to help you decide what type of car you're going to list. All right, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about my story of some of the cars that I've had over the years. So hopefully you guys find that insightful in some way, and hopefully that will help you kind of figure out which way you should go for choosing a car to list on the platform. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Once again, my name is Saimah. This is Saimah's Experience, and if you like this channel, be sure to subscribe, and I will talk to you guys soon.